when those same individuals could be investing at 5.4%.
Madam Secretary.
No, I'm sorry, I would like to.
Madam Secretary, that's just no offense. That's double talk.
It isn't
Here's
double
my
talk because
maybe
it
it's
is
my fault.
expected
Maybe
that
it's my fault.
Have you ever watched someone politely take a blowtorch to government spin? Because that's exactly what just happened when Senator John Kennedy stepped into the ring with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. And let me tell you, it wasn't just another boring Senate hearing. It was a masterclass in cutting through economic double talk with good old-fashioned common sense. Kennedy didn't walk into this meeting to play nice. He came loaded with one question every taxpayer should be asking. Why is the government choosing to borrow money at a higher interest rate when they could lock in a cheaper one? Sounds simple, right? Not if you're the Treasury Secretary. What followed was part debate, part verbal chess match, and part demolition job, all wrapped in Southern charm and razor-sharp logic. If you care about where your tax dollars are going, and if you're tired of seeing elected officials dodge basic math, then buckle up, because this exchange will make your blood boil and make you laugh at the same time. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, always good to see you.
Likewise.
Right now, in our current fiscal year, by our, I mean the federal government, we're running looks like about a $1.1 trillion deficit. Is that correct?
About 1.6, I believe.
1.6 trillion. I'm sorry. It's even worse than I thought. And that, of course, means that we're spending $1.6 trillion more than we're taking in revenues. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And we're filling the hole by borrowing money. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, if you personally were borrowing money, would you rather pay 5.4% interest or 4.4% interest?
The less the better.
Ma'am?
The less the better.
Okay. Then why aren't you doing that with federal borrowing?
Well, in federal borrowing, our objective is to issue at least cost over time and not to try to time the market.
Yeah, but you are timing the market. You issued a press release back in November that you were going to try to time the market. I mean, right now, you can issue 3-month treasuries. These are yesterday's yields at roughly 5.4%.
Yes.
But you could issue a 10-year treasury note for 4.4% and save. Let me just finish. And save the taxpayer a lot of money. And then last November, you issued a press release. You said, we're going to start borrowing more short-term debt than we normally would. At the beginning of 2023, our short-term debt was about 15%. And last November, you said we're going to increase that.
To about.
And now it's about 22, 23%.
Correct.
You're costing the taxpayers billions. Why are you doing that?
So, Senator, you say it costs 5.4%. That's what it costs this year.
No, that's what it cost yesterday.
Yes, but when you issue 10-year bonds, you're locking in the 10-year rate over 10 years. And that 10-year rate, the reason that holders of 10-year Treasury bonds are willing to accept a 4.3, 4.4% yield is because when those same individuals could be investing at 5.4%.
Madam Secretary.
No, I'm sorry, I would like to.
Madam Secretary, that's just no offense. That's double talk.
It isn't
Here's
double
my
talk because
maybe
it
it's
is
my fault.
expected that
Maybe it's my
interest-
fault.
No,
Today, you can borrow for 3 months at 5.4%, but instead you're choosing, strike that. Today, you can borrow for 10 years at 4.4%. Instead, you're choosing to borrow at 5.4%.
Market participants believe that...
That makes no sense.
Market participants believe that short-term interest rates will come down, and they will come down to a level substantially
So you are
below
trying to time the market.
current 10-year rate.
You are trying to time the market.
And so, no, it isn't a question of timing the market. It's we issue across the curve in a regular and predictable way.
So let's talk about what's actually happening here, because this isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about priorities, judgment, and whether anyone in charge is using common sense. Right now, the United States is staring down a staggering $1.6 trillion deficit for this fiscal year. That's not just a big number, it's a national credit card bill growing faster than ever. And how are we paying for it? We're borrowing. But here's the kicker. It's not just that we're borrowing, it's how we're borrowing that Senator John Kennedy just torched. Imagine you're offered a loan at 4.4%. A good deal, right? But instead, you choose the one with 5.4% interest. That's what the Treasury is doing. Instead of locking in lower long-term rates, they're rolling the dice on short-term borrowing that costs more today. Why? That's exactly what Kennedy demanded to know. And when Janet Yellen tried to brush it off as part of a so-called balanced approach, Kennedy wasn't buying it for a second. He saw it for what it was, a raw deal for American taxpayers, plain and simple. This wasn't economics, he argued. This was politics dressed up in jargon. Because when you choose to pay more on purpose, that's not a strategy. That's a self-inflicted wound. And the worst part? Most Americans have no idea this is even happening.
And the reason that
you announced last November, I can show you the press release, where you said that we have decided to start issuing an inordinately large amount of short-term debt, didn't you?
we did make an announcement
And
about
because of the inverted yield curve, that means that you're going to pay more in interest on short-term debt than, say, 10-year debt.
only for a short time.
Now, that's a fact, okay? You can go check the numbers of Treasuries yesterday. That is, first, that costs taxpayers a lot more money in interest. And number two, you're working at cross purposes with the Federal Reserve, because what you're doing is stimulating the market. You're pumping money into the economy. And Jay Powell's over here beavering away trying to reduce inflation. And you're beavering away trying to increase it by paying
that we're doing
an interest rate that is 100 basis points higher than you would have to pay. And the only reason I can figure that y'all are doing that is to try to give the economy a sugar high 5 months before an election. Why else would anybody want to borrow at 5% when you can borrow at 4%?
Now here's where things got real uncomfortable for the Treasury Secretary, because Kennedy didn't just stop at pointing out bad math. He went for motive. See, back in November, Treasury quietly shifted its borrowing strategy. Instead of locking in longer-term debt at lower interest rates, they ramped up short-term borrowing, the kind that comes with higher immediate costs. Why? According to their statement, they expect rates to drop soon. But Kennedy wasn't buying that explanation, not even a little. In fact, he suggested something far more cynical, that this shift wasn't about economic forecasting, it was about political maneuvering. His words were clear: juicing the economy just months before an election smells less like smart policy and more like a campaign stunt. Think about that for a second. If the Treasury is borrowing at higher rates now just to flood the economy with cash before ballots are cast, that's not fiscal responsibility, that's manipulation. It raises a serious question. Is the government making sound financial decisions based on long-term planning, or are they playing politics with your tax dollars? Kennedy turned up the pressure, and the message was clear. This isn't just about numbers, it's about trust. And if his accusation is right, the consequences could be massive.
Well, there is a good reason that investors are willing to accept just over 4% on a 10-year Treasury bond when they can earn 5.4% on a one-year Treasury bill.
I'm not worried about the investor.
Well,
I'm not worried about the investor. I'm worried about the taxpayer.
It's the same logic.
And let me ask you again, because I'm going to run out of time. And look, you're smarter than me. I know that. But I can grasp this concept. You're borrowing at 5% when you could borrow at 4% to deficit spend.
If I borrow it,
And
if
it
I,
makes absolutely no sense to me why you
I'm
do
sorry,
that.
if I borrow,
other
the
than
reason
to try
is,
to artificially stimulate the economy and
if I
help Joe
borrow
Biden
at
get reelected.
4%, if I borrow at 4.5%, I'm locking in that cost over 10 years.
But you just
If
said
I
you weren't
borrow
trying to
at
time the
5
market.
point- Well,
You are trying to time the market.
it isn't trying to time the market because this is something that is a regular part of our policy. When short-term rates are high, it is and long-term rates are lower. The reason for that is that market participants expect short rates to go down, and they expect them to decline over 10 years to substantially under 4.5%. So even if we pay more this year than it would cost to borrow at a 10-year rate of 4.5%, the expected cost over the 10-year life of that borrowing can be the same or less than it would be if we issued a 10-year note. Now, we're not trying to time the market. We have a policy that we want to hold the issuance of short-term bills in line with recommendations of the Treasury Borrowing Advisory Committee.
Now, here's a twist that would make any taxpayer's head spin. While the Federal Reserve is out here aggressively hiking interest rates to cool down inflation, the Treasury is busy doing the exact opposite. Yep. While Jerome Powell and the Fed are slamming on the brakes, trying to rein in an overheated economy, Janet Yellen's Treasury is flooring the gas pedal, borrowing short-term at higher interest rates, which only injects more money into circulation. And Kennedy? He called it out immediately. He basically said, wait a second, how does this make sense? One hand of the government is trying to tighten, while the other is out here loosening. It's like watching a driver step on the brake and accelerator at the same time, and then wondering why the car is shaking. So you've got to ask, are they just wildly out of sync, or is there some kind of deeper strategy going on here? Is this an accidental contradiction or a calculated gamble? Either way, the result is confusion, mixed signals to the market, and potentially more pain for regular Americans. Let me know in the comments. Do you think this is fiscal chaos, or just another day in Washington?
Can I say something now? Madam Secretary, I'm going to say it again. You're a lot smarter than me. But my mama didn't raise a fool. And if she did, it was one of my brothers. And what you're doing, you know it and I know it. And all those people sitting behind you know it. You're paying 5% to borrow money when you could pay 4% to borrow money. You announced you were going to do that back in November 2023. You're working cross purposes with Jay Powell, who's
We're not working.
And the reason you're doing this, is try to give the economy a sugar high 5 months before an election. Now, you know that, and I know that.
There's nothing about issuing short-term debt that creates a sugar
I'm out of
high
time.
for the
My chairman
economy.
says I'm out of time. It's good to see you.
And of course, Kennedy didn't just close the show, he signed off with that unmistakable Louisiana bite. My mama didn't raise a fool. And if she did, it was one of my brothers. That wasn't just a joke. It was a mic drop. A final jab to drive home the point that the American people aren't stupid, and we're paying attention. But let's not get distracted by the charm. Because this moment wasn't about Kennedy's wit. It was about accountability. It was about calling out a financial strategy that, to many, looks more like political sleight of hand than responsible governance. At the core of this fiery exchange is a brutally simple question. If the government can borrow money at a lower rate long term, why on earth are they choosing to borrow at a higher rate short term, especially when we're already $1.6 trillion in the hole? Is this really about sound fiscal policy? Or are we watching a last-ditch effort to give the economy a sugar high before election season kicks into full gear? That's not just a policy debate, it's a warning. Because when Washington starts gambling with short-term fixes while ignoring long-term consequences, it's the American taxpayer who ends up footing the bill. So what do you think? Is this smart economics or political maneuvering at its worst? Let us know in the comments. And if you appreciated this breakdown and want more raw, unapologetic analysis of the madness unfolding in DC, go ahead, like, share, and subscribe. This is The Common Thread, and we'll see you in the next one.